Millennials are delaying marriage and families until later and later in life. There are a host of purported reasons for this. Financial is often listed as the primary reason. It's expensive to get married and have a family. Certainly much more so than it was in years past, when only one single income was needed to support a family of 4 or 5. The inflation currently rampaging through everyone's wallets hasn't made it any easier over the last 2 years. This financial straitjacket many people find themselves in has caused them to preoccupy themselves with pursuing career and education in order to make an income. This task is only compounded by student loans and the skyrocketing cost of living in many major cities, and even lesser populated areas. However, I'd say that marriage and committed relationships, and by extension family and children, have been deprioritized widely in our culture. It's not considered normal to get married young, meaning between the ages of 18 to 25, anymore, as it once was. Nowadays, the average age is closer to 30 for both sexes. And even when people do get married, the coupling often only yields 1 or 2 children, basically replacement numbers for the population. I think millennials and others are making a serious mistake by doing this, and I don't think the reason is strictly all financial. I think it's mainly cultural. It's largely by choice that many people avoid marriage and committed relationships. Why is that? Is it due to people choosing instead to screw around in their 20s with multiple partners? That's a small factor, but I actually think only a small number of people are doing that. In reality, most people are alone or with their same friends every Friday and Saturday night. I think it really comes down to this false idea that there is a perfect time to get married, in conjunction with this finding the perfect partner. It's a preoccupation with perfection. Perfect, however it may be defined in each person's mind. But perfect is the enemy of the adequate, as they say. And for most people, adequate is really all they need and are capable of having anyway. Many millennials are caught in this feedback loop of always holding out for something better. Partly this is due to being offered a seemingly endless buffet of choices on dating apps. But the vast majority of messages on those apps go unread. And realistically, unless you're a really prolific dater, it's unlikely that you're going to go on dates with more than a handful of people from those apps. It's an illusion of choice created by a website algorithm that wants you to spend money on subscriptions. Here's a sad reality. The so-called perfect or ideal time to get married, for the most part, is when you're younger, meaning ages 18 to 25. But so many people ignore this important time because they are fixated on their education, their occupation, screwing around, or putting it off until they are ready to do so. But this cultural norm ignores several important points. When you're younger, love and attraction is more about chemistry and feeling. When you're older, it really becomes more of a business transaction. This is especially true with single parents who get married to partners who don't have children themselves. It's much harder to accommodate someone in your life when you're older and you've established a routine that you're comfortable with. As you get older and stay single, you begin to think solely in terms of yourself and yourself alone, and less in terms of others. This makes it harder to fit a partner into your life, especially one whose lifestyle or personality may not match with the vibe that you've already established. If anything, it creates an obstacle that wasn't there before. Your profession will most likely become the dominant factor in your life, around which everything will hinge. It will suck up most of your time and energy, which becomes increasingly scarce as you get older. This scarcity of time and energy puts a lot of pressure on dates that you do engage in, which can make for uncomfortable and awkward situations. You can't hurry love, as the saying goes. So instead of dating and simply enjoying someone else's presence, there are all of these expectations lurking in the background, because each person knows that the clock is ticking. Baggage starts to build up as you age, and not just due to past or failed relationships that might have left scars, but just from life in general. I see many who were jaded and cynical on the whole deal, and this also becomes a negative feedback loop that's very hard to break. Once the poisons of cynicism and automatic resentment seep in, it's very hard, if not impossible, to eliminate those toxins. But even for people who don't have scars from past relationships, if you've never had a serious one in the past, it's easy to think you'll never have one in the future. This is probably something more men suffer from these days, with the rise of incels and lonely men who never get married or have children. It's kind of shocking the number of people who remain lonely essentially throughout their entire lives. It's harder to make friends the older you get, and to keep them. Having a circle of friends is usually the best way to meet potential partners, because you'll find yourself in social situations like parties and other places more regularly. Waiting to get married gives you less time to build a life with someone and make important memories. You have less time to bond organically. You have to speed everything up because you have less time overall. And like I mentioned earlier, this can put undue pressure on a fragile relationship that can risk breaking it apart. This undue pressure especially comes into play regarding children. A woman who is in her 30s has a shorter reproductive window than one in her mid to early 20s. Men's sperm motility also declines as a man ages, so there's less opportunity for offspring, which is a main reason why many people get into committed relationships in the first place. Generally, you are at your peak physically, and you have the most opportunities to socialize with new people when you are between the ages of 18 to 25. But sadly, many people do not take advantage of this crucial time period. They sacrifice everything on the altar of career and waiting for the perfect time, when the truth is they are living in it at that moment. There's another thing to consider too. Dating is largely cheap and easy when you are young, but as you get older it becomes more of an expensive and time-consumptive drag. I'm convinced this is partly why so many adults have anxiety and other mental health issues. The act of finding a lifelong mate is not something that should extend into middle age. It's something that you're meant to do when you're younger, so that you can focus on other things as you get older. Forming a committed relationship when you're younger also helps you build a foundation for a stronger life in the future. It's much easier to deal with life's slings and arrows with a good partner at your side than facing them all alone. Another aspect to consider is that the earlier you get married, the earlier you have children, and potentially grandchildren as well. By delaying your own marriage, you are cutting short the number of years you'll potentially have with not only your own children, but their children as well. The prioritization of career and money over family and relationships is a miserable trap. It's also contradictory. The world will tell you that 18 to 25 is too young to commit to a partner and begin building a family. But at the same time, the world thinks you're perfectly ready to commit to a 4-year college, including tens of thousands or more in student loan debt, as well as commit to a corporation that you'll be serving a minimum of 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. You can sign up for the military and be sent to war at 17. You can start a business. And yet somehow you lack the judgment and ability to commit to a partner? The world tells people not to get married young because it prefers for them to become a cog in the corporate machine first. It wants you sitting in a cubicle, slaving away in an office or out in a field or whatever. It doesn't care about your happiness or your personal fulfillment. It just wants you to increase the digits in a ledger somewhere. The reality is relationships, intimacy, and personal connection are foundational components of what make for a good life. It's a shame that so many young people find themselves alone and instead wedded to the cold, uncaring corporate machine. Simulating connections through technology with games, porn, social media, or having to run the digital obstacle course of online dating. It's not to say you can't find love or commitment when you're older. People certainly do all the time. But it does become exponentially harder to find quality mates still available on the market the older you get. It's not a myth that many of the so-called good ones are taken early. That's true. That doesn't mean it's hopeless. It means that you'll likely have to be more flexible in your mate selection, and depending on your personal values, that may prove tricky, but certainly not an impossible task. For those that are 18 to 25, recognize the opportunity and the leverage that you have now at this point in your life. Don't be so quick to dismiss the idea of marriage and commitment to a partner. This modern idea of waiting until your late 20s or 30s or even beyond, or even never committing, is not really the norm, historically speaking. It's more of an aberration. Don't let fear control you. Don't give in to the idea that you'll always have choices and opportunities the older you get. That's not always true. The fact is, people change careers and jobs all the time, at all ages. You can always go back to school, get some kind of additional training or whatever, but you can't get back the years lost that you could have spent with someone you care about. You can't get back the lost time you could have spent building a relationship or a family. Don't be so quick to sacrifice what matters most in life for a corporation that will only ever see you as a number and not the person that you are.